principle of law that those who are okay. So there is a provision of law, caveat emptor means buyers should be aware. It means the buyer should have ideas what to buy, what not to buy. So for that purpose, he should have the knowledge. At the last, I would like to say that so many laws have been framed, but we find that things are not coming to the order. The solution of this adulteration of foods, it lies with the willpower of the young people. They might be taught about the morals and ethical values in the life. They must be made aware about the use of education, sports, in career building. The social organizations and NGOs can play a vital role in this context. As a teacher, it is our duty to teach the students about adverse impacts of adulteration in life and make them aware about the role of ethics and various provisions of Prevention of Food Adulteration Act 1954 in the improvement of the quality of food. Today, the time has arrived to tackle this problem so that we can save the health of the future generations and avail their services in making the strong nation. We should always remember that health is wealth and a healthy mind resides in a healthy body. So it is our duty to produce the things which are of a quality. And it is true that when we can create, generate, produce, and distribute the products with purity and quality. So in the 21st century, when we want the everything in a well designed information, so it is the duty of the manufacturer to provide all those things which are necessary to know by a consumer. The father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, said that the customer is the most important visitor on our premises. He is not dependent on us. We are dependent on him. He is not an interruption on our work. Is the purpose of it. He is not an outsider on our business, but he is a part of it. We are not doing him a favor by serving him, but he is doing us a favor by giving us an opportunity to do so. So, in the conclusion, I can say it is the duty of the government to ensure that these fake news and all those informations which are necessary and which are not necessary, they are to be segregated. And Consumer Protection Act 1986 is to be taught to the students right from the beginning of their studies, so that they can become vigilant consumers and they can make use of the things for their betterment. With these things, thank you. Jai Hind. Any question,
Thank you,
sir?
sir.
Okay, ma'am.
So we will take up the questions in the Q&A round once everybody finishes their presentation.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. The next presenter is Dr. Jayashree on the topic public health, legal rights and perspectives. Over to you, ma'am.
Ma'am, I think.
Yeah. Good afternoon,
Yes.
everyone.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Yeah, my topic is public health policy. Yeah, good afternoon. I am Dr. Jayashree. So, public health policy, law and rights perspective. So, my topic is. So far as we know that is the public health is nowadays it's very important. So because we are facing the pandemic since that is 2020 and 2021. It has started at 19 and still it is continuing. So now health perspective, that is the public health perspective is very important nowadays. So my topic is that is focusing on the law and the right. So that is legislations, as we know in every country. So as a constitutional law teachers, as administrative law teachers, we know that is either the state government or the central government, either the legislatures, they will sit 365 days and 24 hours. Then also they cannot make the legislations which are very necessary or essential for the health, for the purpose of the society in need or people in need. So that is the thing. So whatever happens, first we will come to know that is whether the expectations are the future plannings that has to be done by the future disasters or future benefits that has to be decided by the legislatures. They can work, that is guesswork they can do. So that is the thing. So only the guesswork they can do. So when it happens, then they can make anything. So that is the thing. Once they have to know, they have to come across some problems, then only they can do something. So that is the thing. As we know, our country is the federal system. So we are having, that is, the central government will do something, some policies, and state government with respect to some issues, and concurrent list, that is both in center and the state. So they will touch. So that is the thing. So this is the basic idea. So once it was the concept of the state. So that is a state in the sense nation, that is the welfare state, laissez-faire to welfare state we were thinking. So laissez-faire was the days, that is the state has to do only the things about the people, to the people, that is only, it was expectation, food, shelter, clothes. Nowadays it is not like that. Welfare state we are expecting. So from cradle to grave we have to, we are thinking that the state has to take care of everything. So it is because that is the development as it has been taken. So technically, scientifically, so we have been developed so much. So industrially, the industrial revolution has been taken place. So globally, the trade also has increased very much. Like that, the diseases also increased very much. So public health is very important, where the central government or the governments of any particular country has to take care of, because ultimately it is the people who are concerned to the state. So that is, without the people, the state cannot exist. So that is the thing. So for that reason, that is the issues with respect to the implementation of the policies. So as we know that disaster management is the only legislation where we are having nowadays for the public health issues. So many other issues, many other policies are there, but they have been made in hurry. So which have been related to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The right perspective, as we know in the Constitution also, that is right to health, has not been given a special provision or any nucleus provision in the Constitution, but we are having that in the Article 21 of the Constitution, as in the right to life. So that is the thing. So right to life includes everything along with the right to life. So that is the thing. So right to life, so it is depending upon, that is how the state has to implement the legislations to take care of the health of the people. So that is the thing. So whenever it is a matter of the pandemic, so there will be the public health is concerned with, that is the personal problems or the diseases which are not infectious. So diseases we can, that is divide into, that is infectious and non-infectious. So infectious diseases, it has to be, the government has to take care of. So non-infectious diseases, it is, that particular disease, it will end with that person itself. So infectious diseases, more care has to be taken. So that is the duty of the government. So how it affects the life of the people. So nowadays, as we are knowing that, so that is talking about the pandemic and the pandemic diseases since the 1900 we are having. So 1900 we are having everything. 19th century it is. So some diseases with respect to some region. So that was there. So it has not been spread like nowadays it is the coronavirus. So all over the world, so every nation has been affected by the coronavirus. So this is that is till 100 years, or since the generation of the humankind, we have not seen such type of disease. So because of that, how to overcome all this? So what the problems we are facing? So that is many problems we are facing. That is the schoolless children. So that is studentless schools, and problems that create in education of the children, and burden on the parents, so who are also working, and also the economic management of the nation. Nowadays it has been started twice, that is second phase we are facing in India. So many problems which include that economic management of a particular nation. So that is because of if the industries are closed, hotel management is closed, laborers are closed, everything is closed. So how to manage the economy of a particular nation? Already in the world, many nations, they have lost, that is, the economy has been collapsed like anything. Even in America, the European countries, so-called developed countries also suffering from this. So management is very important. So it is not only the government. So by not claiming that we are having the right, that government has to take care. So in this type of situations, it is the duty of every citizen that they have to take care of themselves. So the government can give the guidelines what the citizens can do, but it cannot make, that is each and every person, that is, so since independence, when at the time of independence we are only the 39 crores, now 139 crores, the people how to manage. So the only thing is making awareness. So making awareness and giving guidelines, that can the government can do. So apart from this, the people has to think that what they have to do and how they have to behave. So for the pandemic, the person, they have to self-restrict. Auto limitation we call in international law, self-restriction. So self-restriction for the infectious diseases is very important. Even the educated people, they think that is, there is another thought that corona is not there like that. So what will happen? So nothing is going to happen. So like that it is going on. So no, it is not the thing. It is there or not, but the prevention is better than cure. So we have seen around us only the many people affecting the corona, but the death rate is less compared to the European countries. So my thought is that, my thinking is that is my opinion is that the government can do the policies, they can implement it, but the bureaucrats or the administrators, they have to implement it. So compared to the population, we are having very less persons who has to handle. So for that reason, the educated or uneducated, illiterate, whatever, whoever it is, they have to take care of themselves. So public health, if we control ourselves, if we maintain our health, then it will be helpful for the society. So that is the thing we have to do. So we cannot expect the government to do everything. So government is doing whatever it has to do. So government is taking care of everything. So apart from that, it is the duty of the people that they have to take care of themselves, and they have to live apart from the infectious diseases. And it is their duty also. It has to be implemented in the constitution also. The duty of the individuals at the time of the pandemic, because we are seeing nowadays, so it is uncontrollable that in second phase, no states, that is, they are ready to make the lockdown, but it is uncontrollable. We ourselves, we are seeing that the people will be there in the marriages, birthday parties, and everywhere in the market, shopping, everywhere they are moving like anything. So they are thinking that the government has to control it. So whatever the government will do that affects the economy, the people have to think over that, and they have to come over with pandemic or any such type of things, so that we cannot expect the government to do everything. And we are the people that we should aware what we have to do. So with that, not only the right of ours, many legislations are there, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. According to that, we are having the rights in the Constitution also. So that is, government has to do this and that. Government will do. Then also, it's our responsibility to behave what we have to behave like that in the public health issues, not in the personal health issues. It is public health issues. So with this, I conclude that it is not only the responsibility of the government, it is the responsibility of the people also to take care of their health, which is the public health concern. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I now request Jyotirmay Guntu to speak on trauma faced by people in pandemic by their suppression of rights. Over to you, ma'am. Ms. Jyotirmay Guntu. Ms. Jyotirmay Guntu.
Started. And, she is online, but she is muted.
Yes,
sir.
In order to restrict the spread of COVID-19. But okay, you can go ahead to the next person. Crisis took place in various ways.
Okay, ma'am, 1 second. Meenakshi Yadav, ma'am, are you here, Meenakshi Yadav? Ma'am, we'll take your presentation in the end.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
I now request Shivangi Mishra, Ms. Shivangi Mishra, to speak on right to health and healthcare, the stalwarts of public health system in the face of COVID-19. Ms. Shivangi Mishra, over to you.
Good afternoon. I'll be presenting my paper on the theme, The Right to Health and Healthcare, the stalwarts of public health system in the face of COVID-19. Throughout the course of this presentation, we'll study and reinforce the efficacy of the intersection between the public health law system and the jurisprudence on the right to health and healthcare. Before we move ahead with the proposed intersection, it is essential to understand the dichotomy between the two ideals. That is the right to public health, the public health system, and the right to health and healthcare. When we talk about the public health system, it singularly deals with state intervention or the role of the state in securing or advancing the healthcare and the concomitant interests of the citizens. However, if we talk about the right to health and healthcare jurisprudence, it simply and singularly talks about the relationship between the healthcare providers and the individual entities. But why is the proposed intersection so necessary? When we talk about the traditional notions of public health, we get to realize that the notions of public health simply focuses on the health of populations and not individual entities. Public health aims to provide an aggregate benefit to the mental and physical health of all the people in a given society. It is, if we talk about the right to healthcare, which under Article 25 of the UDHR talks about the progressive realization of the right to health, we need to understand that the intervention of state is essential in order to ensure the progressive realization of the right to health. And at this stage, we also need to understand that the right to health in the modern age has become an all evolving and encompassing term that includes the right to affordable treatment, the right to dignity, the right to privacy, as was remarked in the Supreme Court in the recently pronounced verdict in Kushkara versus UN of India, where it held that affixing posters or any kind of notifications on the houses of the people who have tested positive for COVID-19 was an infringement of the right to privacy and dignity if the situation would not so demand. Hence, in view of these ever expanding notions of the right to health, it is imperative and it's the crying need of the hour that the right to healthcare be realized only through state intervention. Hence, the intersection between the right to health and healthcare becomes imperative. At the heart of this intersection lies the fact that the right to health flows from an individual right to a group right, thereby propelling public health law into action. As we have already discussed, but it's all the more important to remark that the right to health does not merely include prevention of disease and promotion of health, but it also assimilates within its folds prevention of disability and death by early diagnosis and adequate treatment, thereby giving leverage to the concept of preventive medicine. Article 12, in consonance with the aforesaid ideals, talks about the right to mental health, as was also mentioned in a string of cases pronounced by the Supreme Court in Muhammad Ahmed versus Union of India, where it was held that even the terminally ill patients have a right to medical aid. And in the case of Paschim Bengal Khet Mazdoor Samiti versus State of West Bengal, it was held that timely medical treatment is imperative. Hence, these are all expanding notions of the right to health. But when we talk about the right to healthcare being the progressive realization of the right to health through affirmative action by state, what do we actually mean? We mean the intersection of not only these two concepts, but the intersection of multiple stakeholders that can prove, whose contribution can prove to be a welcome change in a scenario that is plagued by a pandemic. Hence, when we talk about the Gavi, the Global Alliance for vaccination and immunization, that talks about bringing together private and public sectors for ensuring vaccination and immunization procedures and techniques to the poorest and far-flung sections of the society and the entire world. We talk about the right to healthcare being realized not only through state intervention, not only through municipal or domestic intervention, but through a coming together of various stakeholders in the process. These stakeholders can also take the form of polyclinics, pharmacies, and healthcare logistics. Now, when we talk about the coming together of various, when we talk about the coming together of various stakeholders, we also talk about the ideals of accessibility to healthcare. It is no gain saying that accessibility would be hampered when pharmaceutical companies armed with patent rights refuse to allow manufacture of the vital medicines and vaccines. Hence, in view of a pandemic and in view of the crying need of the hour that necessitates accessibility to the remote corners of the country, we revert to Article 31, Clause B of the trade related aspects of intellectual property rights that comes to rescue in such a scenario where the stringencies of intellectual property rights should not hamper the vision of accessibility so triumphantly put forward by the right to health and healthcare jurisprudence. It introduces a compulsory licensing mechanism to member states that are denied access to generic medicines due to pharmaceutical patents. So briefly, in a compulsory licensing setup, a state's government legally circumvents the terms pertaining to patent rights to make medicines affordable. In synchrony with the aforesaid objective, the Supreme Court in Novartis AG versus Union of India strove to strike a balance between concerns relating to intellectual property rights and international health law, attending especially to the plight of patients in low-income states. The court underpinned that patent protection to pharmaceutical products through TRIPS involves hazards of putting life-saving medicines beyond the financial reach of large sections of population. Further, Article 12, subsection 2C ICE-SCR outlines obligations of state parties to prevent, treat, and control epidemics, together with Article 12, subsection 2D, that explicitly provides the right to healthcare by directing state parties to create conditions that assure medical services and medical attention to all. Here, the key point, the takeaway is that there has to be an equitable element in providing accessibility. The principle of non-discrimination takes center stage if we talk about the spirit of Article 12, subsection 2 of the ICE-SCR. This leads us to the much celebrated four-pronged strategy adopted by healthcare jurisprudence, the AAAQ strategy that spells out that acceptability, affordability, accessibility, and quality is imperative when we talk about healthcare jurisprudence. Accessibility would not be confined to the physical reach of required vaccines or medicines, but it would also take into account information and awareness that must be provided to the citizens or the people present in the far-flung countries of the world. Affordability simply connotes financial or the monetary form of accessibility. Acceptability would mean that the medication should be congruous to scientific and customary practices. It should be ethical. But most importantly, if we don't talk about these traditional notions of the AAAQ strategy, we must talk about the sustainable healthcare procedure that is the crying need of the hour in the modern day. Sustainable sustainable procedures or sustainable healthcare would mean that the patient or an individual interacts constantly with the environment, and hence for him or her to remain a healthy person, the health of the environment should be should take precedence over all other considerations and factors, and hence doctors and other stakeholders um, in the medical or public health system should take into account practices that are environmental friendly. Now we talk about the conflict between two provisions of the ICE SCR that would shed light on one very controversial aspect of the public health law system, that is this element of coercion that is present in the in the form of state intervention that we are exerting in the confluence or intersection of the public health system and the jurisprudence on right to health and healthcare. If we talk about Section 2, subsection 1 of the ICE SCR, it allows state parties to revert to retrogressive measures in the wake of scarcity of resources. And hence, here, Section 2, subsection 1 of ICE SCR does not take recourse to the term general welfare or any kind of exigency. It simply states that in the wake of scarcity or any kind of domestic situation, it may take retrogressive measures, and in order to progressively realize the rights enshrined in the convention, it can do away or derogate from the enshrined healthcare practices, which is a subjective term and which gives a broad leeway and overarching powers to the state parties to derogate from these pious rules of healthcare. Whereas if we talk about Article 4 ICSCR, it alludes that the state parties may in certain situations impose limitations on rights enlisted in the present covenant, only when such limitations are determined by law and are compatible with the nature of rights enumerated in the convention. Hence, Article 4 talks about, it indicates the existence of a scenario where maybe a pandemic takes place or a health emergency has taken place. So it for the promotion of general welfare in a
Could you
democratic.
conclude it?
Sorry.
Yeah, like you have only 2 more minutes, ma'am. Could you conclude it?
So the conflict between the two terms states the coercive power of the. It indicates the coercive power of the state, and it has been asserted that this Article 4 is somewhat redundant in the presence of Article 2 of the ICE SCR, as it just talks about general welfare, whereas Article 2 refrains from using the term general welfare, and it gives a broad leeway to the state parties to derogate from the pious rights that are enshrined in the convention. Lastly, I would propose that the entire treatise on international human rights be eternally read into the healthcare jurisprudence, as was the objective in the National Health Bill of 2009, which never saw the light of the day, but which singularly talked about the intersection of medical ethics with the healthcare jurisprudence, also fleetingly talking about the incorporation of the international human rights treatise in the jurisprudence. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shivangi. It was a very elaborate discussion on that. Thank you very much. Next, I request Ms. Jyotirmayi Gontu to present on trauma faced by the people in pandemic by their suppression of rights. Ms. Jyotirmay Gontu?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Sorry for the network issue previously.
No
And
problem.
now, good afternoon, everyone. Now, I wanted to present my paper regarding the trauma faced by the people in pandemic by the suppression of rights. As we all know that this trauma is consists of mental trauma, health trauma, and there are many kinds of trauma. But we all this COVID has affected the people in many ways. The migrants has the migrants has been sent out of their states, and healthcare workers mental trauma and their families position, and healthcare workers were treated as untouchables, though they are serving the nation in this severe condition. like um, when we go to the introduction of the this COVID-19, actually it was a first uh, it was first seen in the Wuhan in December itself, and later on WHO declared global health public emergency on January 30, 2020. And in India, the lockdown has been announced from March 24, 2020 itself. And this leads to the violation of human rights. As many people has been subjected to their homes itself, it leads to the restriction of their movement, which is a fundamental right and a human right violation. And human rights in the Union Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights conventions provide for the quality and equitable life for people of all nations. As India being the member of the UN UDHR, it should follow these conventions. And the Article 1 states about the human dignity and rights when they are born. And it should be provided equally irrespective of their status, either economically or financially or politically. And nowadays, when we see the media, it is facing more on the COVID-19 challenges. And the media is mostly focusing on the human rights violation also. Though the human rights violation cannot be set aside and cannot be corrected within a day, it is a progressive change, and it will be progressively. And moreover, when we come to the healthcare workers, people are saying that the healthcare workers were facing mental trauma, like they are sent out of their homes, they are subjected to threat when they are getting into the homes, and they are subjected to, and their family members were also subjected to threat and some kind of mental trauma when they are buying some basic essentials for their homes. And in this meanwhile, they are facing the severe mental trauma. No matter who they are, the trauma faced by them is caused by the society itself. And though this is a unpredictable one, government officials must strike a careful balance between protecting the public health and safeguarding the inherent human rights, like such as education, freedom of movement, access to healthcare. While responding to and public health emergencies, the government need to take care of each and everything. And when we have been seen being a last student, many of the universities sent out their students unpredictably within the 2 days of prior notice, and many students have left their books and their essentials in the hostel itself. And when we come to migrant workers, even the basic public transportation is not provided to the migrant workers. And many of the migrant workers started walking on the roads and the national highways to reach their destinations. And nearly 15 to 20 people of the migrant workers and refugees died in the national highways itself due to the dehydration and some of the healthcare issues. And when we come to the migrant workers, they have been subjected to inhumanity because no public transportation is provided, and no basic wages, no food, and nothing, no shelter. And the migrant workers are dependent basically on the wages itself, and because they are the low income people. And because of this pandemic, it affected their lifestyle in the large way. And the International Bill of Rights also says that it ensures for the basic human rights, like as providing education, food, and etc. And moreover, the violative suppression of their fundamental and human rights caused a great impact in the life orders and the mental arena during the COVID-19. And many of the people were subjected to trauma during this period because they were locked in their own house itself, because there are no people to speak, there are nothing to do, they can't go even outside. So this causes their mental trauma, and because of this, many of the people committed suicide, and their psychological behavior is also changed a lot. And we have seen that many of the suicide cases were also increased during this pandemic itself. And moreover, they were like a powerless society, because we people living in the society should help each other. But in this pandemic, everyone is fear of the virus, and so none provided help to each other. So that that mental trauma increases a lot. So this leads to a powerless society without unity. And during the COVID-19 lockdown, and the state and businesses failed to provide migrants with a human care. Basically, the states have provided the lockdown, so it leads to the very mild availability of the basic essentials. And moreover, when we go to the excessive force usage of the uh, public servants, basically when we see that collectors and MROs, VROs, and basically these government officials at the end of the lockdown came onto the roads to like to protect the people, like, and to dissolve the unlawful assembly gatherings by the people. And though the people are mistaken in this by gathering a lot in this pandemic, and the polices also should not subject people to beating by lathis and something like cruelty, because it leads to mental trauma. When we go outside for the basic essentials, basically we were also subjected to trauma, like where the police comes and beats us, or where they were confined to the police station, where we were confined in this manner. And moreover, the chief minister of Telangana even said that he might issue a shoot at sight order as a stern warning to the public if people continue to breach the lockdown. So by this statement, we can come to a knowledge that people, lockdown has been issued, people were gathering on the roads because of their mental trauma. And the police should follow some basic rules, because of beating with the lathis is not a correct manner. And there is a law which is provided by the Union of India, and the law provides that under the IPC 1860, under the section 188, establishes a public obligation to obey the government's instruction. Under the section 269, it refers to a negligent act likely to transmit infection of a life-threatening disease. Section 270 refers to a malignant act likely to spread infection of a life-threatening disease. And violators of section 271 are those who knowingly obey any quarantine law. While any of these crimes are bailable and pay penalties of imprisonment, fines, or both charging, someone under section 271 necessarily requires the use of a warrant, since it is a non-cognizable offense. Though these are the laws which are provided by the IPC during the quarantines, the policemen should follow these laws. They should take the people to the police station itself, or they should make the people understand briefly, because if not, the people become violent, and they were subjected to like beatings, and this inhuman cruelty is very wrong, because the UNUDHR under the Article 9 also prevents the inhuman nature and the cruelty, imprisonments, etc. So the people should file a case against the people. The police should file a case against the people, and that should be provided before the court. Though online hearings has been held, if the policeman made this and the people get the fear of the law, and they were subjected to their homes. So beating makes the people violent. When we beat someone, they become aggressive, and their mental health also like deteriorates in this mainly serious condition. And when we come to the laws made by some of the CRPC 1973, like under the chapter 10, it states that maintenance of public order and tranquility. Like the police can arrest violators without a warrant under section 151 of the CRPC. Like under section 129 of the CRPC, the police can grant the right to use civil force to dissolve unlawful gatherings. So the police can use this law in their hand impulsively without subjecting to the cruelty. And by the cruelty, though they were in the state of the fear of the virus, and firstly they were in the state of fear of virus, and secondly they were beating, and they become aggressive. The mental health will deteriorate. And these are the basic causes which we cause it ourselves, and the media is increasing its unnecessary views on this, basically. And when we come to the healthcare workers, though we all are praised the healthcare workers a lot, but like they are the warriors of the COVID, etc. And when the healthcare workers, we should respect them. But in basic of the fear, we have deteriorated their position, and we also subjected them to cruelty. Like as a no, cruelty doesn't only mean physical; it also leads to mental cruelty. Like as a something like throwing them out of their houses, not providing shelter to them, like not providing basic essentials to their family. When they are walking on the roads, seeing them as untouchables and non-treatables. And these all are some of the things which we cannot sustain ourselves. And it basically it clearly shows the violation of the Article 14, which comes under the right to equality. There is no equality is seen. And moreover, when we come to the treatment of the people, more people has been thrown out like in the hospitals because of the heavy cases. The maintenance is not good. So more people were like they were treating on the like floors itself. But when we get to the political families, they are treating in their high hospitals, though there was no vacancies. High hospitals are high qualified doctors and high treatment values, whereas the normal people were not given these all, and they were just subjected to the floors itself and the government hospitals. And moreover, when we see that suicide cases are increased because of the pre illness of the mental health. But when we see that only the media is focusing on the COVID-19 itself, whereas the other like heart care patients, asthma patients, liver damage patients, like kidney failure patients, like there are many kind of diseases which evolve in the present world, and the people due to the fear of going to the hospital, they haven't gone to hospital. And the elderly people, most people died because of these cases, because of the lack of a normal monthly checkup. And when I get to the conclusion, government need to take proper care of each and everyone during this basic COVID-19, and they should provide the basic facilities and moral support towards them, like providing some tele healthcare support, like for the mental illness. And latestly, that Nirja Birla, that Birla Foundation has been providing some kind of mental health care to all the people who are getting enrolled in that. And when I conclude this, my team, like COVID-19 pandemic has a global impact in a variety of ways. Since this pandemic necessitates the collaboration of entire society's knowledge scarcity and the need for reliable information. And moreover, the children, due to our in the dilemma because of their studies, and some are saying it's online, some are saying it's offline, and some universities are providing the offline education in the last year itself. So because of that, there were like examinations, and because of that, they are under the trauma at now. And healthcare professionals and the general public were both well informed about the coronavirus, and each and everyone should work together and should provide basic moral support, and should stay connected, like not physically but mentally they should stay connected. And the public should understand the pandemic view, and like it is very strong, it's critical, and the knowledge of communication networks be known and maintained as a top priority during the pandemic. Moreover, each and everyone should help each other hand in hand to overcome the situation, though not physically but mentally, by keeping the humanity at priority and helping the need irrespective of the previous concerns, by supporting morally, mentally, and economically. Like moreover, the people can help each other mentally. Even when we see that when our neighbors are facing the mental trauma, we don't know about it because we are not connected to them. And in the fear of this, we never think about the other people lives and the other people. We are just became selfish people, like we are just thinking about ourselves basically. Even the own family members are in the fear. So this is my conclusion. Thanking you.
Thank you very much, Jyotirmay Guntu. Now I request the next speaker, Urvashi Sharma, to start her presentation on public health and patent laws, dichotomy between reward and price. Miss Urvashi Sharma. Moving on to the next speaker. Our next speaker is Professor V.S. Raju. Professor's topic is the stand of public health under Indian Constitution, human rights perspective. Professor V.S. Raju, the
Yeah, thank you, Amrita Gulshan. And am I audible, Amrita?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Let me also congratulate Dr. R. Srinivasan, sir, and Professor Banerjee Chekka, for conducting this wonderful conference, the quite debatable topic and much required topic on public health. So, I would like to present my paper on the stand of public health under the Indian Constitution human rights perspective. In the next 10 to 15 minutes of my presentation, I would like to deal with the historical background relating to the public health under the Indian Constitution, and what about the present position, and what are the steps need to be taken in order to better access of the public health is concerned. So, in case of I move on with the previous history under the Indian Constitution, which is relating to the public health is concerned. So, the Nehru Report, 1928, which was the historical report that viewed as a public health as a constitutional right. You know, Actually, under the fundamental rights section, the Nehru report mandated Parliament to maintain the health and fitness for work of all citizens. Later on, the Karachi Resolution 1931, which is also an important resolution, which contained a similar provision like industrial workers had to be provided with healthy conditions of work. And apart from that, the maternity leave was sought for women under that particular resolution, and children were banned from working in factories. Interestingly, in both these historical constitutions, the articulation of public health is dominated by a concern for the health of industrial workers is concerned. Even though it is related to the industrial workers, but access to public health is which was important. So, on the Constituent Assembly discussions, even before framing of the Constitution, which was started, the dimension, the jurisprudence relating to the access to the public health is concerned. Later on, Amen Roy's, Constitution of Free India 1944, which contained a right to health provision and which made it clear that, the promotion of public health and sanitation shall be charged on public revenue and as an important provision. And before little bit prior to the constitution, like the Gandhian Constitution 1944, had two fundamental rights relating to public health. The first one, the citizens which should have a right to rest and not to be compelled to work for more than 8 hours a day. Then as Nehru report and Karachi resolution, which concerns about the public health relating to the work and workers and workplace, which need to be provided. That again reiterated in the Gandhian Constitution 1944, and every citizen would have right to medical freedom. The Gandhian Constitution 1944, which said that, and while Constitution, which was being framed between 1946 to 50, the Socialist Party of India at the time, produced a draft Constitution of the Republic of India 1948, majorly which influenced, the Constituent Assembly. That particular draft Constitution given by the Socialist Party, which talks about economic rights, and economic rights include, right to public health, which need to be maintained to the women and children at the factories and etc. So it is clearly resembled with Article 39 of the present Constitution, 1950. So apart from Article 39, Article 39 Clause E, the Indian Constitution, which we have provisions like Article 47, which places duty on the state to raise the nutrition levels and standard of living of people of India, which considers public health as a primary duty and prohibit that sale and consumption of intoxicating drinks and drugs is concerned. So what I'm trying to tell here is the public health provisions in the Constitution have focus on workers' health, women, and children. But unfortunately, even though after the pronouncement of lot of judgments by the Supreme Court, the highest judicial body in India. So the governments which are not taking care as more, which is not working towards the better policy or better legislation towards the public health in India is concerned, and a lot of debate which is there as per the present the public health is concerned, which is existed in the state list, which need to be moved to the concurrent list. The much debate, even some committees which were recommended on that, but the government which are not doing. The parliament which is not concentrating on that, which is a much debatable question in relation to the protection of the public health is concerned. In case of, I move on to the present condition, and the declaring the right to health a fundamental right is concerned. The present pandemic, which has been shown and exposed the deep vulnerabilities in the Indian healthcare system. Actually, in we are the country, the India, which is very less expenditure on public health, only 1.29% of the GDP in the financial year 2019 and 20. So, which is very lower in comparison with the most of the developed countries is concerned. And moreover, why we failed at the pandemic time is concerned. Another critical reason, the weak public health in India is the absence of a statutory framework that guarantees a fundamental right to health, right? So it should be, and there is a overwhelming need to make the right to health as a fundamental right, and implement within the framework of the legal devices and human rights principles of solidarity, proportionality, and with a transparent manner is concerned. From the grassroots itself, the access to public health and protection of public health, and right with the right to equality, which need to be taken care, every individual which need to be taken care equally. Even the previous presenter also, which talks about that, which need to be taken care equality, so that need to be taken care of. Particularly the constitution and right to health, in case we see, nowhere the constitution does not expressly guarantee fundamental right to health, but we can take multiple references regarding the public health in the constitution, and the role of the state in the provision relating to healthcare to the citizens is concerned. As I mentioned, the directive principles of state policy, part 4 of the Indian constitution, which talks about that the right to health, or promotion of healthcare is concerned. Article 39 is one among that. I already talked about it. Talks about state to secure health of workers, and Article 42 also a similar provision, directs the state to just and humane conditions for work and maternity relief. And as I said, Article 47 casts on a duty the state to raise the nutrition levels and standard of living people, and to improve public health is concerned. And moreover, we can observe one more provision under panchayatis and municipalities is concerned. The constitution, by this 73rd and 74th amendment, which has been added, the panchayats and municipalities to strengthen the public health, and Article 243G is concerned. So, in case of, I quote, certain cases like no expect recognition of the right to health or healthcare under the Indian Constitution, which has been held by the Supreme Court in the case of Bandhu Mukti Morcha versus Union of India, which has been interpreted the right to health, which is there under the Article 21, which guarantees the right to life. In another judgment, State of Punjab and others was Mohinder Singh Chawla, the Supreme Court reaffirmed that the right to health is a fundamental to the right to life, and should be put on record that the government had a constitutional obligation to provide health services is concerned. And in another case, State of Punjab versus Ram Lubaya Bagga, the court went on to endorse the state's responsibility to maintain the health services is concerned. And further, in case of I speak, the 15th Finance Commission has, had recommended that the right to health to be declared as a fundamental right, and also put forth a recommendation to shift the subject of health from the state list to the concurrent list. But the recommendation to declare the right to health a fundamental right, if implemented, will strengthen the people's access. But the later recommendation to shift the in relation to the state list to the concurrent list will do a constitutional conundrum on whether the centralization of public health will be helpful in the context of, in relation to, in case of we compare Indian federalism and Indian cooperative federalism is concerned. So actually, as per the Finance Commission recommendation to declare, right to health a fundamental right, if implemented, will strengthen the people access. Definitely, it according to my research, it will strengthen. and the clear cut demarcation of a right to health is a fundamental right which will lead to better access to the public health and development of the healthcare in India is concerned. So even Niti Aayog also in a recent report which has been talked about, unequal public health systems in India which need to be reduced and which need to the governments, both state governments and central government, which need to be concentrate on development of the public health and the healthcare system in India. Right. Uh, the mere mentioning in the directive principles of state policy relating to the public health and public health care and relating to the human conditions of workers or protecting of women and children from the maternity and development of which need to maintain nutrition of food in the among the children, women, etc., which is not sufficient. Which the proper statutory provision and a better framework of policy, which is required to strengthen the public health is concerned. So. What are the principles to be adopted in the concern in case of we see um, equal care, equal treatment need to be given to the all the citizens of India, and which need to be the right to health need to be incorporated into a basic fundamental right under the part 3 of the constitution is concerned. So in case of we draw our attention to the international jurisprudence which is relating to the right to health or public health is concerned, so most of the countries which is giving a priority to the protection of their citizens health is concerned, but unfortunately we are not doing so. So a lot of like ICCPR and UDHR, these all article 12 of the ICCPR and some provisions of the UDHR which are talking about public health and protection of public health is a prime criteria and very important. According to the main objective and basic objective of those international conventions, so we need to cope up and we need to protect our citizens health is concerned. So in addition to statutory recognition, the right to health in India will need to be implemented within the framework of principles of solidarity, proportionality, and transparency that are the central to the international human rights and health law is concerned. So the principles of solidarity is closely linked to the fundamentals of justice and equity. So in that context, the right to health, solidarity can guarantee equal access to the public health systems to all is concerned. So actually, in the current pandemic situation, India marginalized communities, are proportionally they got affected. So as the constitution preamble in case of we see, so everybody if by equality nobody should got affected, the marginalized communities should be uplifted is concerned irrespective of their sex, caste, class, religion, and language is concerned. So and the doctrine of proportionality is also a tool to determine the correct balance between the restrictions imposed by the state as a corrective measures and the severity of the prohibited acts is concerned. And the one more thing is what we need to follow is the principle of transparency, which is in the good governance to ensure the people's health and development of the healthcare in India is concerned. And in case of the fundamental right to healthcare in case of further I talk. So I said international covenant on civil and political rights and the international covenant on economic and social and cultural rights, which talks about the public health and right to public health. And even though with the so many judgments which given by the Supreme Court, the right to health, which is part of the right to life under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, but proper statutory backup and proper policy relating to the right to health and public health and health development of healthcare which need to be taken care. So the constitution incorporates provisions guaranteeing everyone's right to highest attainable standard of physical and mental health is concerned, right? So in lot of judgments, maybe in terms of lot of judgments by the Supreme Court in terms of pollution cases against hazardous drugs, against human conditions of the care homes, like relating to the surgery camps, relating to the medical aid to the injured persons, relating to the health hazards, relating to the blood banks availability, etc., are smoking in public places, are treating of HIV patients. The Supreme Court, which has been given very wonderful judgment in terms of public health is concerned, we need to adopt those principles according to the proportionality, transparency reasons is concerned. So at the international level, some I drawn some of the countries' attention are from the World Health Organization Constitution also have referred. So the highest attainable standard of health as a fundamental right of every human being. So in order to understand the health as a human right, it creates a legal obligation on state to ensure access to timely, acceptable and affordable healthcare of appropriate quality, as well as to providing for the underlying determinants of health, such as potable water, sanitation, food, housing, health related information and education, and gender equality. So it is a state obligation to support the right to health, including through the allocation of maximum available resources, which are we are failing, particularly in India. So to progressively realize this goal, which need to be reviewed every year, and under the periodical review which we need to develop, right? And we need to take a rights based approach to health, which requires the health policy and programs must prioritize the needs of those furthest behind for the greater equity, and in order to protect the public health, even in case of the river 2030 agenda for the sustainable development of universal health coverage is concerned. So according to the sustainable goals which has been adopted, so which we need, the India need to be considered, and which need to enact a proper regime for the protection of public health is concerned. And the right to health must be enjoyed without discrimination. As I said, the grounds of race, age, ethnicity, or the status is concerned, it should be given equality. Right? For that is concerned, no the discriminatory law which will not affect the proper law with proper practice and proper policy which is required. So another future in case of ITEL, the rights based approach is a meaningful participation. The participation, which in my sense, which is ensuring the national stakeholders, including non-state actors such as NGOs, in all phases, the NGOs, the government need to be given weight to the NGOs in order to assessment, analysis, planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. With these words, I would like to conclude my presentation. But in the end of the words, the proper legislation, proper policy, and need to be recognized public health as a right to health as a fundamental right, with a proper care and caution. So, and the government should more work on this area, and the government need to spend more amount on the protection of public health is concerned, is the much required criteria now in order to protection of right to health and development of healthcare in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. I now request Meenakshi Yadav to kindly present her paper. Over to you, Ms. Meenakshi Yadav.
Amrita, people can keep their videos on, there's no problem. Yeah.
Ma'am, should I start?
Yes, Ms. Meenakshi Yadav, you can turn your video on by presenting.
Yeah, ma'am, it's on. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Meenakshi. I'm going to present my paper upon the topic Importance and Challenges of the Public Health System. I would like to start by saying a quote as said by the British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. The health of the people is the foundation upon which all their happiness and all their powers as a state depends. Without a basic level of health, it is difficult or impossible for people to work, to attend school, to enjoy recreation, to enjoy other basic freedoms. Now, we'll discuss what is public health. The definition of public health is in close relation with the broader definition of health, which is enumerated in the preamble of the Constitution of the WHO, World Health Organization, 1948, where health is defined as a state of complete physical, mental, social well being and not merely the absence of disease. According to WHO, public health refers to all organized measures, whether public or private, to prevent disease, promote health, and prolong life among the population as a whole. Basically, the aim is to provide conditions in which people can be healthy and focus on entire populations, not on individual patients or disease. Now, I'll discuss the different dimensions of public health. First is preventive medicine. Prevention is better than cure is one of the prime messages of the public health. Prevention was initially narrowly construed in terms of protective measures like vaccination and improved nutrition. But this concept was extended over the years, which now includes early treatment of sick person with the aim of preventing advanced diseases and in the case of communicable diseases. Now, the second dimension is social medicine. Statistical analysis of mortality and morbidity data shows strong correlation between the social stratification in the society and the pattern of health. Uh, at the end of the scale, the affluent, educated, privileged employers. Hello, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible, but we are not able to see you.
Thank you, ma'am. Basically, the social medicine is based on certain fundamental. Social medicine is based on certain fundamental assumptions like health is a birthright. Everyone has the right to enjoy the highest possible level of health. Social factors have a profound influence of the health. Development and health are interrelated. The good health promotes development and development promotes good health. Third dimension of public health is community health that deals with the services that aims at protecting the health of the community. The fourth is community medicine. It usually refers to services that are provided at the community level. Community physicians, nurses, and other healthcare personnel are involved in providing care at clinics, health center, etc. Now we'll discuss some importance. The first notion of right to health under the international law is found in 1948 UEDHR, which was unanimously proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly. The right to health is included in ICSCR. Article 12 of the ICSCR explicitly sets out right to health and defines steps that states should take to realize progressively and to the maximum available resources, the highest attainable standard of health. The language of progressive realization and maximum available resources, which suggests different standards for different countries. The reference to highest attainable standard of health was taken from WHO constitution. The highest attainable standard will necessarily evolve over time in response to the medical inventions, economic shifts, etc. In addition to ICSCR, a wide international and regional treaties recognize health as a right issue. If we review the international instruments and interpretive documents, it makes it very clear that the right to health is enshrined in the international law, extends well beyond the healthcare, which includes basic preconditions for the health, such as potable water, adequate sanitation, and nutrition. The government of India envisages the goal of health for all as a healthcare is important component of social security and development. As per the Constitution, public health, sanitation, hospitals come under the purview of state list. That is entry number 6, state list 2. If we closely look at the bare text of the Constitution of India, that will come to the conclusion the right to health has not been directly incorporated as a fundamental right. However, the framers and the founding fathers of the Constitution had imposed the duty on the state in the nature of DPSP under Part 4, where the responsibility is upon the state to ensure social economic justice to the citizen. For the very reason of the DPSP holding only persuasive value, the state used this as a weapon to escape its duty, responsibility, liabilities in providing and protecting health of the common public. Therefore, the Honorable Supreme Court came to the rescue and brought the right under the Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Like one of the previous speakers said, in case of Bandhua Mukti Morcha versus Union of India, the court held that although the DPSP hold persuasive value, yet they should be duly implemented by the state, and the court had interpreted the dignity and health within the ambit of life and liberty under Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. There is a well understood correlation, as we all know. As the economy of a country improves, so the health of the citizen also improves. What may be less obvious is that opposite is also true. Improving the health of a nation's citizens can directly result in economic growth because there will be more people able to conduct effective activities in the workplace. Now I will discuss some international treaties and conventions ratified by the India. Some of them are Alma Ata Declaration 1978. This declaration was adopted in 1978 and it was the first international declaration and hence an important landmark. The goal of this declaration was to achieve health for all, particularly through primary health care. Secondly is Millennium Development Goals 2000. 8 international goals under it were adopted by all member states, and some of the goals are to reduce child mortality, to improve maternal health, etc. I will discuss the changes. I listed down some challenges. First is health systems are grappling with the effects of existing communicable and non-communicable diseases and also with the increasing burden of emerging and re-emerging diseases. That is like current H1N1 pandemic. And second is inadequate financial resources for the health sector and inefficient utilization results in inequalities in health. So the expenditure on public health funding has been constantly low in India, like it is approx 1.3% of the GDP. Third is poor health management skills and lack of appropriate training and supportive supervision for health workers. It prevents the delivery of the desired quality of the health services. Although these challenges have an impact on the health in all countries, they disproportionately affect poorer countries which not only lacks the resources to manage them, but also lack the political and economic power to negotiate effective uh, international agreements to achieve better health and justice for population. Within countries, poor segments of the population are disproportionately affected by the health risk and by mortality and disability for diseases. Now, the question arises how to address these public issues. To meet the formidable changes described earlier, there is an urgent call for revitalizing primary health care based on the principles outlined at Elma Ata in 1978, that is, universal access and coverage, equity, community participation in defining and implementing health agendas, and intersectoral approaches to the health. These principles remain valid but must be reinterpreted in the light of dramatic changes in the health field during the past 30 years. And attempt to achieve health for all have been carried forward in the form of Millennium Development Goals. Second is contribution to the health of the population derives from a system outside the formal healthcare system. And this potential of intersectoral contributions to the health of the communities is increasingly uh, recognized worldwide. Thus, the role of government in influencing the population health is not limited within the health sector, but also by various sectors outside the health sectors. Third is public funding on health should be increased to at least 2.5% of the GDP as envisaged in the National Health Policy 2017. So I would like to conclude by saying a paragraph. In this changing world with unique challenges that threaten the health and well-being of the population, it is very much necessary that the government and the community collectively rise to the occasions and face these challenges simultaneously, inclusively and sustainably. Social determinants of health and economic issues, consensus on ethical justice, dignity, security, and human rights. This approach will be of valuable service to humanity in realizing the dream of right to health. Wow.
Thank you very much, Meenakshi Yadav. I think we have completed the um, topic since the other speakers are not there. We can start with the question and answer session. Ma'am?
Yes, ma'am.
The floor is open for taking up questions. I request all the listeners, all the participants, if you have any questions, to please pose the questions.
Uh, Good afternoon, ma'am. I would like to
Yes,
ask what are the various measures Indian government in order to public health among the citizens of India?
Ma'am, can you please repeat the question? It was not audible completely.
And also, could you mention the name of the person to whom you are putting up the question, ma'am? Ma'am?
Miss Meenakshi Yadav?
Hello, am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are
Am I
audible
audible,
now.
ma'am?
Yes. So we request you to please pose the question once again, and also please direct it to a presenter.
Ma'am, anybody who would like to answer that
Okay,
can
please
answer. There's
pose
no
your
such
question.
restriction I would like to.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Can you please repeat the question, please? Miss Meenakshi Yadav, can you please pose your question once again? It was not audible earlier.
I think she was asking whose duty is to ensure the health of the citizens. So I would like to answer on this topic. On 18th December 2020, Honorable Supreme Court held that it is the duty of every state to ensure cheap and affordable treatment of the citizens, because India is a very large country having huge population, and they are unable to afford the health services at their cost. So keeping in view the spirit of the directive principle of state policy, and nowadays which have converted into fundamental rights under Article 21 on so many occasions, the Supreme Court directed the states to ensure that they should make a mechanism where every citizen of that state can ask for the treatment, can go for the government of the diseases. So it is the duty of the states to ensure that how the CHC, all those these health services, health centers, and these citizens who are in the form of diseases as the patients they are approaching, they are to be treated as per their best mechanism. And as we know, so many laws are there, but it will depend upon case to case.
Thank you, sir. And to add that, the government should take a certain stringent action. The government private hospitals, they are charging very high prices, and also this currently this National Disaster Management Authority is looking after this COVID-19. So the government has to establish a separate wing to deal with the pandemics, maybe in the coming future. So, and also it has to make some clear policy and law dealing with the public health. So, in the April 3rd of 2021, it make a law on relating to the public health policy, not law. But the law is that policy is not adequate to deal with the certain situations that we are facing currently because of the pandemic, like migrant workers, the problems faced by them. So we have to update the laws uh, as per the modern challenges. So
Thank you, Dr. Vedpal Singh, and thank you, Professor Marti. Any other questions can be posed before the panelists here?
Any questions? Ma'am, can we wait for a few minutes or shall we wind up the session?
The developmental activities, the transportation,
Professor Bharati,
Sir?
you can summarize the presenter's views, and in the meantime, if someone has any other observation or point to raise, they can raise. Otherwise, after you summarize, we can finish the session.
Okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for all the presenters. So, majority of you spoke about this right to health, which is not specifically there in our constitution, but it was through the Supreme Court judgments or the interpretation of the Supreme Court in various judgments. Right to health is included as the part of Article 21, and you also spoke about the welfare state, and also this. It is the duty of the every individual to take care of their health, and everyone should take care of their health. And another point which Shivangi Mishra mentioned about the right to privacy, which is very important. And whenever any person infected with the COVID-19, the government is pasting the papers in front of their walls, which is against to the right to privacy. And she also spoke about the stakeholders. And also Professor V.S. Raju, he spoke about this constitutional aspect, and Article 21, how the Supreme Court interpreted Article 21 and how it included right to health in that. And about the food adulteration and the laws made by the parliament to protect the public health and to prevent the food adulteration. And also the Donaghy versus Stevenson case that was mentioned by the Dr. Vedpal Singh, and the caveat emptor rule, which a buyer should be aware whenever he or she is purchasing any goods. And so he also mentioned about this Consumer Protection Act, but there is a recent enactment of this Consumer Protection Act, that is 2019. So he mentioned about all those things. And so all these paper presenters, they are very informative, and we get a lot of knowledge by hearing all these paper presentations. And it's the research done by each presenter is very good. And and thank you all for presenting the paper, and thank you for participating in the session. Amrita ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, you have anything to say?
No, ma'am. It was indeed a very informative and a wonderful session. I thank all the presenters for their time and their valuable research that went behind this. It is indeed the need of the hour for such a topic to be spoken on, especially when the pandemic is going on and with the increase in inequality that is happening in the country. Right? It is expected that the inequality would come down, but unfortunately the difference is only increasing, and with very little involvement and interest that is posed in the health sector, it is very much needed to speak on this topic. And I thank all the presenters for their valuable research and sharing their knowledge with everybody. Thank you.
Ma'am,
Sir,
I wanted to ask
yes,
a
ma'am.
question. Yes, ma'am. If you could allow me, I could pose a question to Srinivasan sir.
Yeah, Shivangi, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Yes, Shivangi, please.
Yes, sir. So if we contemplate or take into account Section 188 of the Indian Penal Code, and Section 2 of the Epidemics Diseases Act, we get to see this very striking feature of states' coercive power, which is considered to be kind of violative to the principles of autonomy, sir. So how do we delicate how we strike a balance that is not impinging upon the state's liberty, upon the state's power, and also an individual's autonomy? How do we strike a balance between the two? Because I think there's a complete absence of a legal treatise or a legal rule on a matter so subjective and so elastic in nature. So I think we'll have to take recourse to the discipline of social sciences itself, which again presents not a very objective line of reasoning.
Yeah. Shivangi, if you have finished your question, I will share some thoughts with everyone. See, the first point which I would like to put straightforward is public health. We should not look at it as something which should be enforced through government measures or through courts only. Okay. Because health is not just the government's concern. Health is an individual's concern, and therefore it is a society's concern. Okay, so when you are talking about striking a balance between the coercive power of the state and the individual right, the freedom of an individual, we have to look at it from a slightly different perspective than from purely legal perspective. I will give you another example. Okay, you and me also do some small savings. I'm giving a parallel example. Okay, you and me also contribute to Provident Fund, insurance, and all this, post office savings schemes, etc., etc. Now, whatever you save is not only yours; it cumulatively forms the money that is available to the government for carrying out welfare measures. Now, if Shivangi Mishra saves 100 rupees a month and Srinivasan saves 10 rupees a month, Shivangi Mishra should not go around demanding 10 times more welfare measures than what is given to Srinivasan. That is where we talk about equity and equitability. Okay. In the same manner, when we talk about the powers of the state, like when pandemic started, government said you cannot go out, you cannot step outside the house. If you're not wearing a mask, you'll be challaned, you can't drive a vehicle with this. All these, restrictions were put, and many people, including you, me, everyone, felt that the government is impinging on my privacy. Why can't I attend my cousin's marriage? What is so great? Why are you telling me that not more than 5% to get together? After all, it's my cousin's marriage. I have only one cousin. It is affecting my privacy, my right as an individual. Now just imagine one Srinivasan who is COVID positive, because he insists on upholding his personal freedom in attending one marriage where 200 other people also attend, and he spreads that disease to 200 more people. Is it anyway benefiting to the society? Not at all. So therefore, in certain dimensions, enforcement is necessary, because enforcement addresses the larger interest of the society, not an individual's interest. Like, I'm a serviceman, okay? I served in the Air Force before. Okay. Now, if there is a war, you are aware that there will be blackout. Okay, all people are expected to switch off their lights in the house, and cars and vehicles cannot ply on the road till the time the air raid siren sounds all clear. Okay, because the enemy is attacking your place, you have to switch off everything so that the enemy cannot see what is on the ground. Right? Now, I cannot say that I have the freedom to switch on the light because I have an examination tomorrow morning. Yeah, it is going to affect you. If you have an exam tomorrow morning, blackout today night is going to affect you. But if you switch on the light, It's not only you who are going to get killed, the whole town will get wiped out. Okay, the public facilities, civic amenities, roads, water supply, electricity, healthcare, everything will get affected. Okay, the civil administration will go bonkers restoring things back to normal. Okay, so is your individual right more important than the society's right? That is a question for which we have to give an answer. Okay, so many times people who are, I would put it this way, people who are human rights activists, they do not know where the borderline is. Okay, like we have had instances of trial by media. You are aware of that. Like even the courts have passed strictures on trial by media. Why is that stricture passed by the court? Don't you think the court is aware of the individual's freedom of expression? Yeah, individual's freedom of expression is very good. It is necessary to be upheld. But till what limit? Is an individual's freedom more important than the society's freedom? If it is so, then we need not have any law. We need not have any enforcement mechanism. We need not have courts. We need not have police. We need not have any procedures. Let people do whatever they feel like. If you are a dharmatma, you will abide by dharam. And if you are not a dharmatma, you will do whatever you feel like. You are free. You are free. But a society cannot function that way. So when we talk about the strictures passed by the government in view of the pandemic, if we feel that our individual freedoms have been affected, we are forgetting that our individual freedom is subject to society's well-being. Okay, even if you look at our shastras, if you look at this thing, you say, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Okay, everybody's family. If everybody's family, everybody should be good also, no? It's not that I only should be good, but I will say Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Sorry, they don't go together. Okay, so please try and understand that the strictures which are passed by the government are taken in the sense of public good. There is something called public good which we have to uphold. It will definitely affect. Okay, even a murderer can claim, why should I be put in jail? Okay, you try me in the court when I am given the hanging punishment punishment of death, I will go to the gallows after my appeal to the President of India fails. Okay, but I should not be put inside the four walls of a prison because I am a free man. I have the freedom. So the same principle applies here also. Okay, so when we look at these kind of measures, we must look at what is larger good, what is good for the society, what helps in controlling a pandemic situation. It may not necessarily suit every individual member of the society, but the larger interest should be seen. Okay. Having said that, I will also say this, that so any restriction is good enough. Okay, you may not have been born at that time, but I am sure you must have read about the emergency in 1977 in India. Okay. That kind of restriction is bad. That is not in the larger good of the society. Forget about individual getting affected. It is not in the larger good of the society. So government cannot enforce something which is adverse to the larger good of the society. So long as the government restrictions in the pandemic era are aimed at providing safety, health safety to each and every member of the society, we should accept them as the correct measures. Otherwise, what will you do? Like tomorrow, if you have, let's say you end up running, I don't know, they're going to be a lawyer or you're going to be an executive in a company, or maybe you will end up owning your own company, we don't know. Okay, if you say that all my employees are free to do whatever they please, can you run your company? Because they have the freedom to act the way they want to act. If all the students in the university have the freedom to do whatever they feel like, can a university run classes? There has to be restriction. And that restriction is for larger good. And individual violators must be held to law. They must be punished. Okay. Otherwise, the larger good cannot prevail. So it is from that point of view, I would like you to understand this restrictions that have been put by the government. Yeah.
I would also like to add one more point. that with respect to the Indian Penal Code, Section 188 that you have mentioned, for implementing the penal laws, there is also a procedural law, CRPC, under which, especially pertaining to Section 46, I would like to lay emphasis on, which prevents police from use of excessive force. So that can, in fact, prevent the authority from using excessive force if it is provided that it has to be proven that it is excessive when the procedure is going on. Also, even in Constitution, there is a specific mention of arbitrariness, right? So these two together could solve the problem, This was also laid down in Maneka Gandhi's case, where the state cannot impinge upon the personal liberties. There cannot be excessive use of force by the authority, not just police, but any state authority. So I think these could be the solutions.
Yeah. In fact, I know. Shivangi, are you a law student?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. There is
finally
a
a
very
law
interesting
student.
case. Good, very nice. There is a very interesting case, an old case, but very often cited internationally.
Yes.
It's called the Rochin's case in United States.
That case is often cited because it overruled 3 decades of the case law. So
Rochin's case, he was a known smuggler, okay, drug peddler, okay, and the police realized that he was locked up. I mean, he was in a hotel lodging room or whatever. The police went, they knocked, he didn't open, they barged in, they forced him to take salt water or whatever is to vomit so that that drugs which he was carrying comes out. He had swallowed it when the police came. Okay. So the case went to this thing eventually to the United States Supreme Court. Okay. And the argument was that his individual freedom, the police violated his individual freedom. They forced him to cough up the evidence. That was the accusation against the police. Now, when you look at that case, it's so stellar, so clear that if an action has to be done, okay, which is in the larger good of the society, I'm coming back to the same point which I told you. Okay, the individual's freedom has to be controlled. Yeah, okay, fine. There will be some amount of excesses. Yeah, the person can be compensated if necessary. But that does not take away the power of the state to impose restrictions. Okay. But when we talk about the power of the state to impose restrictions, we are talking about something which is very vague. Okay, let us say Shivangi Mishra is, inspector in charge of one police station. Okay, Srinivasan is inspector in charge of another police station. Now Shivangi Mishra believes in human rights. She is a law student. She will treat the criminals also with due respect and due propriety and due whatever. And Srinivasan only believes in using danda. Okay, both of them are wrong. Srinivasan is also wrong. Shivangi is also wrong. Because you are dealing with crime. Okay, and certain amount of leeway has to be seen or given, not necessarily endorsed. There is a difference between seen, given, and endorsed. Okay, you can't blindly say that, okay, torture is acceptable. No, sorry, not acceptable. As a matter of principle, torture is not acceptable. Third degree methods are not acceptable. But then, I leave that question there. Okay, so there are certain things which are very gray, like like your CRPC. What does it say? A person charged with a crime punishable with 7 years or more, can be kept in judicial custody for 6 months, and then he has to be released on bail. Now tell me, how many under trials are there in India? Are they all charged with 7 year or more punishable crimes? Not at all. There is a problem. The problem is because the executive machinery does not have the wherewithal to enforce the principle which is enshrined in your law. Okay, there are problems. These problems will always be there. Okay. But when we look at it as legal professionals, teachers, practitioners, we must apply our reason. We must apply our see, there is no unilateral condemnation, there is no unilateral praise. Again, what does the courts do? They go by case. Just because Menaka Gandhi has been decided in a particular manner, all other cases have not been decided in a similar manner. Every case by its own merit. Same way, we also have to look at situations by their merit. Okay, we should decide them based on the principles of law which will be applicable for that particular case. Okay, you are aware that before 2000 Indian courts had not given the punishment of death even in cases where minor children were raped. Indian courts were very hesitant. But in 2000, in the year 2000, there was a 13-year-old girl's case which came up from Bihar, and the Supreme Court of India went only by circumstantial evidence. It said even circumstantial evidence in such a heinous crime is good enough to punish that person with death. Path-breaking. Okay, so again, the point I'm trying to convey is the principle of law has to be seen on a case-to-case basis or the merits of each case. In the case of pandemic, the larger health of the society is involved. So if the government is telling you stay at home, don't go out, don't gather in groups of more than 2 or 5, it is our duty to uphold those restrictions. Because it is not only for you, it is for your neighbor, it is for your friend, it is for your relative, and it is for Mahati and Amrita and Sehaj and everybody else. All right? Okay? All right. Okay. Any other points?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, please. Any other points, Mahati?
Sir, no, sir.
Okay, I have one point for those people who are submitting their papers. Okay, you are aware that we are planning to publish all the presenters' papers as a special issue of the EJSS, our journal. I have only one request. Please proofread, please copy edit, take a check your spelling, English, everything, and give me the citations. You can use endnotes. You can use endnotes. Don't use footnotes. Okay, use endnotes, but give the citations in APA, American Psychological Association, 6th edition format. Okay, so if you do this copy editing, proofreading, little bit of polishing your language and give citation properly, we will be able to bring out the special issue as soon as possible. Thank you so much.
Sir, Sehaj Sareen, she has to present her paper, sir.
Okay, yeah, she's most welcome.
Yeah.
Sorry for the delay. Actually, the mail which had all the links was in my spam. So I was, thinking, I don't know, sir, why this happened.
Don't worry, you are ready? Are you ready?
The meeting must have been over, but I tried to.
Yeah, no problem, ma'am. Like,
really, guilty for that.
No problem.
Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Are you ready to present?
Sir, actually, this is my first time to present a paper. If you can, guide me how to present that, I will.
All you need to do is, you already finished your paper, you have written your paper?
Yes, sir. Yes,
okay.
Sir.
Tell us what is the objective of your paper. Okay? Tell us yes. what are the findings that you have made, and tell us what recommendations have you got.
Okay.
Only 3 points. What is the objective? What are the findings? And what is your recommendation?
Can I get 2 minutes only, sir?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Mahati, anybody else was left out?
Sir, the persons who presented their paper, they left out from the meeting.
I know. Anybody else who's... No. Okay, because I'm seeing when Sankara Janvi also online.
So she's our student, sir. Jahnavi is our student. And there are a few persons who haven't attended. So I think 4 persons. Mohan GV, Gayatri Bhai.
Gayatri Bhai, yeah, correct.
Urvashi Sharma.
Yeah.
Yes, these three persons, they haven't
I saw Dr. Gayatri
shown
by
up.
logging in somewhere. I don't know where. Is she in the wrong session? Let me check. Because I have the screen on this side also.
Ma'am, there's also number 9, Mohan GV and
Yes.
Vidusha.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I mentioned.
No, she's not here. She's not in the other session, but I saw her logging in. I found her logging in. Anyway, she must have left. Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Sir, is there any person with the name Mohan GV?
In this session, yeah, let me check. Mohan GV. No, he's not here.
Okay.
He's not here.
Okay.
No, he's not here.
Okay, so may I start, sir?
Yeah, Sahaj, please start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Said Sareen. And the title of my paper is Human Rights and Illegal Organ and Human Trafficking During the Period of COVID-19. So the main objective of my paper is to, educate or, spread the knowledge that human trafficking and illegal organ trafficking do happen before the time of COVID-19. But this coronavirus period has, played as a role of being the fuel to that fire. And, it has increased the instances and the incidents of human trafficking, and particularly the illegal organ trafficking. So this is the objective of my paper. The main findings that I have been studied in this paper are, um, first of all, I have described human trafficking in simple words. And the other objective of my paper is to also, I used really simple words and simple sentences. So a person who doesn't know anything about this is able to, understand what is the title and what is the meaning of the paper and what I'm trying to convey through this. So the findings that are in my paper are, I have discussed the meaning of human trafficking. Then why is human trafficking, is a crime? What are the reasons that there is criminalization of human trafficking? And then its relation with the human rights, how it has violated the human rights. And lastly, recommendations. I won't say that I have made many recommendations, but yes, a few. Like, there are various challenges that survivors of human trafficking face, mainly. So, we, the people of the society, we need to, have a little soft corner for them, and we don't have to make them feel like they are the victims of human trafficking, or they need special treatment or everything. This I have seen this is in person also. This literally makes that person who have already suffered human trafficking, it's his or her condition more worse. So we need to treat them as normal persons, and not just highlight their condition and every time everything that they have been gone through. So this is what I have written all in my paper. I hope you will like it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahaj.
Sahaj, have you talked about any law that concerns human trafficking in India?
Sorry, sir, will you please repeat?
I am asking whether you have talked about any legal provisions concerning human trafficking, human organ trafficking in India?
Yes, sir, I have talked about like the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956. Trafficking is also prohibited under the Article 23(1) of the Constitution of India. Then I have also talked about uh, 1 minute, sir. Yes, sir, I have talked about the laws, like, mainly the measures that have been taken, the action plans, like the OSCE action plan and everything. Do you want me to describe
Yeah,
that?
yeah, you must, because that tells us how much you have understood the subject. Yeah.
Oh, okay, sir. So, trafficking in human beings, as I told, is a crime, and it's morely of a multifaceted crime. So, there have been many measures which have been taken by the government to combat human trafficking. Number one, the OSCE Action Plan to combat trafficking in human beings. It provides the framework of OSCE activities in support of the anti-trafficking efforts. Basically, the role, the commitment for the action at the national level, it is known as the three P's: prevention, protection, and the prevention, protection, and again the protection. Prevention including advising root causes and awareness raising. Protection includes investigation and adjudication. Then the third P also stands for the protection, but for the protection of victims' rights initiative, including assistance, compensation. In 2013, a fourth P was also added by the OSCE, which stands for partnerships. It highlighted the need for enhanced cooperation with the international organizations and other partners, including the issues related to enforcement of law, national referral mechanisms, and joint working between public institutions and the private sector. Then we can also learn to recognize the traffickers' recruitment tactics, like how you can safely navigate out of a suspicious situation. If you have a well business, you can provide. Mainly, I talked about the ways in which we can prevent human trafficking at our own individual level. Like if we have a business, we can provide internships, jobs, and trainings to the survivors of trafficking. We can host awareness events with anti-trafficking leaders so as to make everyone in our society aware of the traps and frauds. College students can also spread awareness about human trafficking and can also establish a university club for this purpose. And if you or someone is a healthcare provider, we can extend low cost of free services to the victims of human trafficking. And apart from this, there are a number of ways by which we can take a step in removing this problem of human trafficking from the whole world. If everyone decides to take a small measure like those mentioned some of above, it will really bring a huge change in the society. Constitutional and legislative provisions related to the trafficking in India, I also talked about them. Like Article 23(1) of the Constitution of India, it prohibits the human trafficking. Then the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956, ITPA, it is considered as the premier legislation for preventing trafficking for common sexual exploitation. This is it, sir.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Thank you, Sahaj.
Thank you.
Mati, would you like to say something?
No, sir.
Sir, I would like to ask a question.
Yeah, Meenakshi, you want to ask something?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
So, do
go
we
ahead.
have any special enactments for for human trafficking in India at present?
I thought Sahaj just gave some of the provisions. Sahaj, would
Yes,
you
sir.
like to
She
answer the
discussed
question?
about.
Yes, I told about the special provisions that are mainly concerned about human trafficking in India, like the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act 1956.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mahati, you can go ahead.
So, sir, thank you all. Thank you so much for participating in this conference. And I should say thanks to Dr. Srinivasan because he stayed from morning 9:30 to till here, and he's attending this technical session 2 and technical session 3 simultaneously, like parallelly. And thank you so much, sir. From past few days onwards, like you are working on it tirelessly, and I'm thanking you on behalf of entire VIT AP University and VIT AP School of Law. And I should say thanks to Amrita ma'am also for her. Yesterday she prepared this entire program schedule, and she's working on this from past few days. Thank you so much, ma'am. And once again, thanks to all the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Mati, and thank you all the participants, and special thanks to Dr. Srinivasan sir for your time and your immense efforts.
Thank you, Amrita. Thank you, Mahati, and thank you, Sahaj, Meenakshi, and all other presenters. Okay. Please send me the papers if you have not sent me already. Number one, as I told you. Number two, yes, we have a recording of the entire proceeding, and in consultation with Professor Mahati and Dr. Banerjee, we will host it on YouTube. We have a journal channel. Okay, we'll host it there after we consult with them. Okay, we'll let you know. We'll mail you the link to all of you. Have a pleasant evening. Have a great time. Do well. Okay, and God bless you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice day.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care, sir. Have a nice day. Bye bye.
Thank you.